And welcome everybody who's joining live, and also welcome to those of you watching a recording later. So yes, as Warren said, this is a series on the three trainings, so virtue, meditation, and wisdom. And the first talk was about cultivating virtue or precepts. The second one was a general overview, kind of look at meditation. And today I will talk about wisdom, which that's an intimidating topic, right? So we'll have an approach to talking about wisdom. But what I've realized that this is going to become a four-part series. So today we'll do what I kind of think of as the first turning of the Dharma wheel and talk about wisdom in a way that we can understand the concepts. And then, ultimately, you have to practice yourself. I have to practice myself. But the fourth talk, which I believe will be the final talk in this series, I'll go back to the practice of precepts and meditation and look more specifically at how we can use those tools to cultivate wisdom, what we talk about today. So that's where I see this going. So let's see how it goes. Yes, I think we ought to start with kind of remembering what the ultimate goal of Buddhist practice is. And the ultimate goal of Buddhist practice is freedom from suffering. And this doesn't mean that we're running away from life or avoiding responsibilities. Actually, the Buddhist practice is about living a fully engaged life and fulfilling our responsibilities, but doing so without emotional afflictions, without vexations, and without suffering. So this is freedom from suffering. This is liberation. And, this really does require us to bring the full path together. And that's where the three trainings or the three studies comes in. So the three trainings are virtue, meditation, and wisdom, or sometimes precepts, meditation, and wisdom. And they're a summary of the Noble Eightfold Path, which also has these three components, right? And so as Master Yin Shun said, without practicing the precepts, one cannot succeed in meditation. And without practicing meditation, one cannot attain wisdom. And without cultivating wisdom, one cannot be liberated. We cannot be free of suffering. So yeah, we talked about precepts first, talked about meditation a bit, and now we'll talk about wisdom. And then I'll try to tie them all together in the fourth series talk. So today we'll be talking about wisdom. So the question is, okay, what is wisdom, right? So we're talking about the Buddhist view of wisdom here. And as many of you surely know, wisdom is the English term for what in Sanskrit is prajna, and in Pali is panya or punya. So sometimes I may use the term prajna. I think I actually cut one of those quotes out, so maybe not. Maybe we just focus on wisdom. But if you do much reading, you'll see prajna a lot, prajna paramita a lot. And if you read the Pali texts or listen to Pali teachers or Theravadan teachers, you'll hear them speak of panya and punya a lot. And this is all wisdom. So let's go back to those early teachings for a moment. And I want to quote something from a Nikaya, a Majjhima Nikaya sutta. And this is from Majjhima Nikaya 43. And this is a really wonderful sutra where a monk is asking Sariputra some questions. And the wisdom from Sariputra's answers is really beautiful. So if you have a chance, please read Majjhima Nikaya number 43, among all the rest, which are also beautiful. So this monk asks Sariputra, why is a person called wise? Or what makes a wise person? And Sariputra answers, a wise person is called a wise person because they understand. And what do they understand? They understand this is suffering. This is the origin of suffering. This is the cessation of suffering. This is the practice that leads to the cessation of suffering. So Buddhist wisdom is understanding the Four Noble Truths. And no matter what Buddhist teachings you are reading, they are all pointing back to the Four Noble Truths. It was the Buddha's first sermon, not because it was the basics, but because he was giving his 5 ascetic friends the key, the real heart. And that was all they needed to attain enlightenment. So all the Buddhist teachings point back into these Four Noble Truths. So wisdom is the understanding that liberates us and others from suffering. Or in the words of Master Sheng Yen, when you do not cause vexation and suffering for yourself, that is wisdom. When you do not cause vexation and suffering for others, that is compassion. Now, Master Sheng Yen also says, wisdom means awakening to the true nature of self and suffering. So why must we awaken to the true nature of things? What does this have to do with the Four Noble Truths? It's our misunderstanding the true nature of reality, what in Buddhism we call ignorance, that is the fundamental cause of all our suffering. So this is the second noble truth, the origin of suffering, this misunderstanding the true nature of reality. While understanding or awakening to the true nature of reality, what we call wisdom, is the cessation of suffering. That's the third noble truth. So the Buddhist path of practice is all about shifting our views and behaviors from those that are based on ignorance, a misunderstanding of the true nature, to those based on wisdom, a understanding of the true nature of things. Now, when we talk about wisdom, and when we think about wisdom and we think about practicing to cultivate wisdom, it can start to sound like we are creating something new and obtaining something special that we don't already have. We might think that ignorance, as used in more common terminology, is not knowing something, and that wisdom is learning some new type of knowledge. But wisdom is just the true nature of self and things. It is right here with us all the time. There's nothing to create. There's nothing to gain. There's nothing we need to do that isn't already present. It's because we grasp onto wrong ideas about self and things, this ignorance, that we have vexations and suffer. Ignorance is adding misunderstanding on top of how things really are or truly are, while wisdom is seeing the error in our thinking, letting go of that error, and just being with the true nature of self and things. So through the study and practice, we can see our wrong ideas about reality. We can see our ignorance in our minds, and we can see through that ignorance and let go of ignorance. And that is awakening to the true nature of reality as it already is. So when we stop attaching to ignorance, wisdom is naturally there. It's adding ignorance that is the problem. That's suffering. That's the cause of suffering. Letting go of ignorance is wisdom. That's the path of practice. That is the cessation of suffering. That's awakening to the true nature. And that is an understanding of the Four Noble Truths. Now, we'll talk about it a little bit more, of course, but there we go in a nutshell. All right, so as Sariputra said, a wise person is called a wise person because they understand. And what do they understand? They understand this is suffering. This is the origin of suffering. This is the cessation of suffering. And this is the practice that leads to the cessation of suffering. So in Buddhism, we talk about the three turnings of the Dharma wheel, right? And this refers to three stages of developing wisdom or right view. It refers to three stages of understanding the Four Noble Truths. And Master Sheng Yen put it like this. He says, the first turning is to hear the Four Noble Truths and understand their meaning. The second turning is to believe in the Four Noble Truths and enter the path of practice. The third turning is to actually realize the Four Noble Truths through cessation of suffering. And at this third turning, suffering and the causes of suffering are extinguished, and one has attained liberation. So today, let's take a first turning of the Dharma wheel, and let's hear about the Four Noble Truths and understand their meaning. And then I hope you will use those to look into your life and experience and investigate this understanding, and then perhaps join the fourth series of this talk where we'll talk about that practice, the second turning, as well. So again, the Four Noble Truths: suffering, the cause of suffering, the cessation of suffering, and the path of practice leading to the cessation of suffering. So what is suffering? Suffering is the mental discomfort, the stress, anxiety, distress, anguish, torment, unease, agitation that we experience in our minds because we want the present to be other than it actually is. Suffering is not physical pain. It's not the long line at the grocery store or the traffic jam on the highway. It's not the rude colleague at work. Suffering isn't anything in our environment. It's not anything in our body. Suffering is created in our own mind. Suffering is our own self-centered judging, seeking, and rejecting the present, instead of just being with the present as it is and working with that. All right. So we have in Buddhism something called the three categories of suffering that can help us understand this first noble truth a little more clearly. So these are the suffering of suffering, the suffering of change, and pervasive suffering. So what is the suffering of suffering? This is the one that we can all really relate to the easiest, right? So suffering of suffering is the suffering that we experience through our reaction to unpleasant experiences like physical pain, a rude person, losing our job, being sick, getting old, our car breaking down, the bus being late, whatever it might be. It's not those things that is the suffering of suffering. It's our reaction to those things. So when we experience unpleasant circumstances, our habitual reaction is to reject the present as it is. Try to deny it, avoid it, wish it were different. And this rejection, it's not that it leads to suffering. This rejection of the present as it is suffering, right? This is suffering of suffering. It's as if we believe that the present that is already here, right, could be different than it actually is, or should be different than it actually is. But the present that is already arisen has already arisen. So how could it be different? We can't go back in time and change all the causes and conditions that brought this moment about. So all we are doing by rejecting the present as it is giving rise to vexation and adding suffering to the present. Now, I always want to clarify this point. This doesn't mean that we just passively leave everything in life to fate, right? We can work with the present just as it is to affect change, positively for the future. We can put our coat on right now so that we can be warm in the coming moments. We can plan right now for an event that's going to happen next month. We can work right now to improve a bad situation so that the future can be better for ourselves and others. But if we're rejecting, denying, or wishing for a different present than the present that actually is here and now, then we are caught up in suffering and not seeing the present clearly. We are thinking and acting based on ignorance. So instead of rejecting and fighting against the present, we can learn to be with the present just as it is and work with it in whatever way is needed from a position of clarity, stability, based on wisdom, without vexations, without adding suffering. So this is the most obvious form of suffering, suffering of suffering, our reaction of rejecting the unpleasant, of rejecting some aspect of the present as it is. The second form or category of suffering is the suffering of change, or the suffering of impermanence. And this is the suffering that we experience through our reaction to pleasant circumstances. And now most people think, oh no, the pleasant circumstances are all good, right? I'm trying to go get those so I can get away from suffering. Well, truth is, we actually react with suffering to pleasant experience as well. Now, perhaps it's a warm, sunny day. That would be nice right about now, at least here in the East. Or spending time with friends, or we're on vacation, or somebody is praising us about something. We do experience joy. This can and does bring happiness to us, right? We feel good about these things. Our mind lightens, our mind brightens, our heart kind of brightens, our mood lifts. But we also suffer. Why? Why do we suffer in reaction to pleasant circumstances? Because we want to hold on to that moment or hold on to that thing, not lose it, don't let it change. We want it to be something permanent. Or perhaps we like the experience, but we think, hey, this could even be better if it was sunnier or warmer or lasted longer, or they praise me about more things that I've done. Right? So even just thinking it's good, but it could be better, it's not good enough. That's also suffering. So grasping at things in the present, not wanting them to change, not wanting them to be how they are, this is another form of suffering, or wanting them to be better. So perhaps some of us have kind of darkened the last day of a vacation or our day off work by reacting to the fact that it's almost over, that it won't last. That's one way I've definitely seen people suffer in response to something that's pleasant. Instead of enjoying that time, we find ourselves agitated, distracted, upset. So when that pleasant experience is gone, then, or has changed, then we also suffer because we long for it. It's a pleasant thing, but we're longing for what is gone or is different, and we suffer again. So our thinking, our acting in these cases is based on ignorance. It's based on a misunderstanding of the true nature of things. And because of that, even pleasant circumstances cause us to suffer. So instead of attaching to pleasant circumstances and wishing for the impossible, that they last forever or never change, we can learn to just be with the present as it is. Enjoy this moment as it is. And when it's over, let it go. We can be with life and enjoy life, and we can also deal with life's difficulties, both from a position of clarity, stability, and wisdom, without vexations, without adding suffering. Now, pleasant things do bring us some joy, and that's important in life. So I'm not saying avoid pleasant things, right? But even they do lead us to suffering when we approach them from a position of ignorance. And that's the suffering of change. So the third category of suffering is called pervasive suffering. And pervasive suffering is the suffering that we experience simply as a result of our belief in, attachment to, and grasping to the idea of a separate, individual, permanent self. This suffering is there, whether it's pleasant circumstances, unpleasant circumstances, or neutral circumstances. This is pervasive. So pervasive suffering is this kind of deep-seated agitation of mind or unease that comes with the sense of separation, that sense of isolation that we feel when we do erroneously believe in and attach to the idea of a permanent, unchanging, independent self. Right? And this sense of separation and this agitation that comes from that is the basis of lots of other vexations like fear and worry, feelings of vulnerability, defensiveness, aggressiveness, all sorts of things around this sense of general unease or angst, right? This kind of general persistent sense of being uneasy or unsatisfied and this need to fulfill this somehow or cover over this somehow or to protect this self that we believe in. So this pervasive suffering pervades all of our experience when our thoughts and ideas are based in ignorance. So to be free of pervasive suffering, we must see and see through and let go of our attachment to the idea of a separate, permanent self. We must cultivate wisdom. So that is pervasive suffering. All right. Now, hopefully that helps us understand the first noble truth a bit, this idea of suffering. And now we come to the second noble truth, the cause of suffering or the origin of suffering. Well, actually, we've started to touch on that already, right? By talking about these three categories of suffering. So if we kind of now focus on the origin or the cause of suffering, two angles we might take to look at this. One way is to view the cause of suffering as our wanting the present to be different than it is, right? Grasping, rejecting, trying to hold on to the pleasant, trying to get away from the unpleasant that's already here right now in this moment. And then, of course, experiencing all of the emotions that rise from that: anger, hatred, desperation, anguish, grief, whatever it might be. All right. The early Buddhist teachings, like in the Nikayas, often refer to this view of the cause of suffering as craving. Well, craving for sensual pleasures, that's the grasping. Craving for annihilation, that's the rejecting. And then this third type of craving they define, craving for existence. And that brings us to kind of the second view of the cause of suffering, this more fundamental level than the grasping and rejecting itself. That more fundamental level is this craving for existence, right? So our reactions of craving and rejecting and the suffering that arises with them when we're in the present because of this idea of a permanent, unchanging, independent self, where does that come from? It comes from the idea of that permanent, unchanging, independent self. So there's the grasping and the craving, right? The craving for sensual pleasures, craving for annihilation. But that comes from what we would call fundamental ignorance, that very idea of an unchanging, permanent, independent self-nature. Now, Master Sheng Yen has what we could call the Sheng Yen equation. No, if you would have appreciated that, but I think you would have found that humorous. The Sheng Yen equation that describes the origin of suffering. And what is the Sheng Yen equation? It is karma plus vexations equals suffering. Karma plus vexations equals suffering. So what is karma, right? That sounds like a big topic. And you're probably thinking, oh my gosh, is he going to talk about karma? We're going to be here all night. It's actually very simple. In this equation, what does karma mean? It means the present moment just as it is, which is the result of the coming together of innumerable causes and conditions. So karma is this, just as it is. Vexations are our self-centered habitual reactions to the present of judging it, wanting it to be different than it is, that grasping and rejecting, right? So these reactions, these vexations are based on our erroneous view of a permanent, independent, unchanging self-nature. So here's the present just as it is. We add, and that's great, right? The plus sign, we add vexations based on ignorance, and therefore we suffer. All right. So because of this pretty deep-seated, conditioned, erroneous view that we have of a permanent, independent self, we believe that we can obtain and hold on to things permanently, that we can push away and get rid of things permanently, that we can feel a certain way permanently, that we can be a certain way permanently, and so on, right? So, but this is impossible. Right? When we think this way, our thoughts, our ideas, our words, our actions, they are not aligned with the true nature of reality. They are out of alignment with the way things really are. Our expectations are not aligned with reality, the way things really are. So it's really not surprising that we suffer, right, as a result of this. So this is the origin of suffering, attaching to the idea of a permanent self-nature and all of the grasping and rejecting that comes from that, and the suffering that is. Okay, how are we doing? 8:30. I was going faster than I thought. Good. Questions. So, third noble truth, the cessation of suffering. All right. When ignorance ceases, suffering ceases. Okay, we're finished. Yes, that is the third noble truth, but if only it were that simple in practice, right? But when ignorance ceases, suffering ceases. I'm not going to go into the 12 Nikayas or the 12-link chain of dependent origination, but the first link is suffering, and the last link is the whole mass of suffering. And when ignorance ceases, as the Buddha says in the Nikayas, the whole mass of suffering, birth, aging, sickness, and death, despair, anguish, and so on, ceases. So when when ignorance ceases, suffering ceases. All right, well, when does ignorance cease? It ceases when we let go of the idea of a separate, permanent, independent self-nature and see for ourselves the true nature of things. So that's the cessation of ignorance. That is wisdom. When we let go of ignorance, we let go of vexations, and we're free of suffering. So when I was preparing this talk, it really struck me how any talk about of wisdom, see there, it's so combined. Any talk about wisdom is really a talk about ignorance, because we are not creating anything new with wisdom. Wisdom is understanding, seeing through, and letting go of ignorance. That is wisdom, right? So a lot of talking about ignorance, because that's what we got to let go of, and wisdom manifests. So to understand, to see, to understand, to let go of ignorance, that is, to cultivate wisdom, we have to think about and contemplate and look into ideas about what? The true nature of self and things in our own experience, right? So we need to think about these things. We need to ruminate on these things. And then we need to look to see how they manifest in our own direct experience through our eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, mind, sensations, perceptions, volitions, and so on, right? We really have to look into it. And there's a really nice set of teachings, which one of my favorites, the three Dharma seals that help us do that, that help us look into, think about, and contemplate the true nature of things so that we can then contrast that to and understand and see through ignorance and let go of the ignorance in our minds. So the three Dharma seals, a seal here is like stamp of approval, right? A stamp of authenticity. And the three Dharma seals point to the true nature of self and things, the true nature of reality. They point to wisdom. So, what do the three seals state? What are these three seals? The first one is that all things are impermanent, conditioned, and subject to change. Okay, pretty good. So, all things are impermanent, conditioned, and subject to change. The second Dharma seal is that all things are unsatisfactory or suffering when grasped at or rejected. Or we might say attached to. Attachment includes grasping and rejecting. So all things are unsatisfactory or suffering or dukkha, to use the Sanskrit term, when grasped at or rejected. And the third Dharma seal says that all things lack inherent existence or an inherent, permanent, unchanging self-nature or an inherent self-identity, something unchanging and permanent. All right, so I led a couple of 3-day retreats last fall, and I talk about this there, and I use the example of a tree. And I'm a plant biologist. You know, Warren said that I'm a biology professor. I'm actually a plant biologist. So I'm also going to use the example of a tree here, right? It's a very beautiful image, but it also really helps us understand this. So we're talking about the true nature of self and things. That's the way I like to talk about it. That includes everything. So here we'll start with talking about the three seals as they relate to the true nature of a thing, something we don't usually identify with, a tree, right? All right. So a tree is impermanent, conditioned, and subject to change. And it has no permanent inherent self-nature. And if you have one in your backyard that you like a lot and you attach to it and it dies, then you will suffer. All right. Right. But it's impermanent, conditioned, and subject to change and has no permanent inherent self-nature. So a tree is composed of entirely non-tree elements that have come together in this moment to create what we call a tree. And these non-tree elements that currently make up the tree are constantly changing. So a seed has to land in a good location with some soil, exposure to the sun. It can't rot. It can't get eaten by a squirrel, right? So just the right conditions have to be there. And if that seed manages to germinate and begin to grow, it's taking in water, it's taking in minerals, it's taking in carbon dioxide, it's bringing in light, it needs warmth, it needs all these non-tree elements to come together into what we call a tree. And when we have a mature tree, well, water's coming into the roots and it's exiting the leaves. Light's being absorbed during the day, carbon dioxide's being turned into sugars, oxygen is being released into the air. Gases are moving in and out, liquids are flowing up and down, cells are working, chemical reactions are pumping away, right? Old leaves drop, new leaves form, roots are growing, bark is shedding, flowers, fruits are forming, fruits are falling, maybe being eaten, maybe just rotting. This tree is constant change. constant change of the causes and conditions of these non-tree elements that at any point in time, if it's in the right form, we'll call it a tree. And at death, what happens? It breaks back down, right? And returns to ions and molecules that become air, water, soil, bacteria, fungi, other plants, animals, even us. Right? I mean, I know I ate some I ate some plants that came off a tree today, an apple. So there's a part of a tree in me. So this tree arises, it persists, and it perishes from the constant coming together and changing and dispersing of non-tree elements, that is, causes and conditions. So it is what we call a tree, but at no moment is there a lasting, inherent, permanent, unchanging tree nature to be found or grasped at. So what is the true nature of a tree? Well, it is impermanence, constant change, interdependence, and a lack of inherent permanent treeness. There is a tree, but there is no tree to attach to. And everything is just like this. The tree, our job, our car, the weather, our family, friends, favorite restaurant around the corner, and even the things that we do identify with, our body and mind. So when we deeply understand that everything is conditioned, impermanent, constantly changing, and without an inherent permanent self-nature, then we can be with the present just as it is, and we can work with the present just as it is without adding suffering. So self and things. Tree for most of us is a thing, all right? At least most of the time. So how about something that we do call ourself? Well, that would be the body and mind. The body and mind we very much identify with as part of this idea of a permanent, unchanging, independent self. Right? This is me, my body, my mind. But let's start with the body. The body is also conditioned, constantly changing, and entirely made up of non-body elements. I saw Warren just take a drink. Right? Food and drink, non-body elements. We are what we eat. That's cliche, but it's pretty true, right? Food and drink, vitamins, medicines, the air that we breathe, food and drink in, solids and liquids out, gases in, gases out, liquids flowing all around, reactions occurring. And when it dies, it also breaks down into ions and molecules that again become air, water, soil, bacteria, fungi, plants, animals, including other people. Right? So the body's true nature is impermanence, constant change, and interdependence. And at no single moment ever is there a lasting, inherent, unchanging, permanent body nature to be found. All right. Now, here's a few interesting facts to ponder. I find this fascinating. This is just a few of them. I have a longer list, but I'm not going to overdo it tonight here. So, our outer layers of skin, right? The outer layers of skin of the body, they're replaced about every 3 to 4 weeks. So I don't know when my next talk is going to be, but if it's longer than 2 months from now and you come back and see me, you will not be looking at the same bag of skin sitting in front of you, right? Will it be me or will it be somebody else that you see? Interesting. All right, well, let's just get straight into the hard parts. What about the bones, right? The bones feel stable and reliable, right? All right. Actually, our bones are completely replaced about every 10 years or so in a process called bone remodeling. Now, it's a slow turnover. It's not like one bone's taken out and the next bone's just put right in, right? It's not like changing a battery. It's a slow, overturning of the entire skeleton every 10 or so years. So the bones that we have now, the skeleton that we have now, is not the same skeleton we had 12 years ago. So in Chinese Zen, in Chan, which is the school of Buddhism that I practice in, there is a meditation question that asks, who is dragging this corpse around? Well, apparently it's not these bones, right? At least for not more than 10 years. So who is dragging this corpse around? And what is this corpse, right? Is this corpse myself? Is this body myself? If there's no true body nature, where is the self in this body? Now, for those of you who know more biology, there are some cells that hang around for a while, some neurons, some cells of the eyes, the lower layers of skin cells. That's why your tattoo lasts until your body dies, right? So those cells stick around for most of our life, but the cells of our body are constantly turning over their parts, right? Their membranes, their proteins, their watery interiors. So this can happen every few days, sometimes a little longer. So even the cells that stick around, they're not the same cells. So basically, every 12 years or so, based on our bones, it's a completely different body. There is no permanent self nature to the body that we identify with so strongly. So do we fully accept deep in our heart that the body is conditioned, impermanent, constantly changing, composed totally of non-body elements and has no inherent permanent self-nature? Or do we react to changes in our body with self-attached angst, anger, fear, surprise, irritation, embarrassment, rejection, as though the body should stay young, strong, healthy, smooth skin, whatever? We all have our attachments to the body. So from the position of ignorance, we attach to ideas of a permanent, unchanging self. And we project that onto everything we experience, including the body. And from that position of ignorance, we grasp and reject the present as it is, give rise to vexations, and add suffering. So wisdom is seeing and understanding these false views and letting them go. I'm repeating this over and over. Right? That's basically going to be what the fourth talk focuses on. How is precepts and meditation seeing our ignorance and letting it go? All right, but what do we identify last here, even more than the body? It's our ideas. It's the mind. It's the thoughts. It's the ideas, it's our views, it's our opinions, it's our emotional reactions to the present that we identify with most as being a permanent, unchanging, independent self. But these two are conditioned, changing, impermanent, and without inherent self-nature. We didn't have any views or opinions in our minds at birth. They've all been conditioned into the mind over time. Psychology says that even the idea of a separate self, that there is, that we perceive that we are a separate self, separate from other people around us, separate from our surroundings, does not come into the mind until about 18 months of age. So it takes some time, even for that, to be conditioned into our minds. All of our views, opinions, ideas are created and conditioned through what? Through what other people have told us from childhood to today, from what we read, from what we hear, from what we see, feel, taste, touch, smell, what we think about, right? All of these condition the next arising of views, ideas, thoughts, and feelings. So all of our ideas, views, opinions, feelings, emotions are impermanent, changing, lacking an inherent, permanent, unchanging self-nature. Yet that's exactly what we believe them to be. So, as a result of constantly seeking and rejecting for the sake of this apparent but non-existent permanent self, we suffer. If instead we see the self and things as they truly are, conditioned, impermanent, subject to change, without inherent, permanent, unchanging self-nature, then we can live our life fully as it is in accordance with wisdom. We can be and live in the present just as it is without adding suffering. We can enjoy good times when they're here, but not attached to them. We can patiently, clear-mindedly work with difficult situations and do our best to improve them, but not attached to them. So it's precisely because of the conditioned, impermanent lack of an inherent self-nature that we can practice and transform ignorance into wisdom, that we can be free of the suffering of suffering, be free of the suffering of change, and even be free of pervasive suffering. So liberation, freedom from suffering, is not about escaping the impermanent, conditioned, constantly changing self and things. It's not about escaping from the body, the mind, or the environment. It's not about escaping from thoughts, feelings, and sensory experience. Liberation is understanding the true nature of these things. It is understanding the nature of self and things, the nature of reality, the nature of self and suffering, and just being here now with the present, just as it is right before us, and working with that and not adding suffering. That is the third noble truth. That is the cessation of suffering. All right. Now, how about the fourth noble truth? The path of practice leading to the cessation of suffering. That will have to be a fourth talk. That will have to be the final talk in this going to be 4-part series on the 3 trainings. In that last talk, we will return to precepts and virtue. We will return to meditation, and we will talk about how practicing precepts and meditation lets us see, understand, and let go of ignorance and manifest wisdom in our minds, in our speech, and in our actions.
Báo